honor to introduce the soon-to-be doctor, Celina E. Dubin. And all of you, doctor, have read your bio, but I think it is worth reviewing. A short, a young life, but a very full life, spanning languages and cultures and elite undergraduate institutions, and then probably the most competitive of pursuits, getting into medical school, and now on the edges of getting matched in your specialty. Celina E. Dubin is currently a candidate for Doctor of Medicine in the class of 2022 at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, which is our neighbor. And she has applied to dermatology for her medical residency training. She previously graduated from my alma mater, magna cum laude, Harvard University, where she studied psychology and global health and health policy. I do want to say that we shared the same institution, but she got to live in Harvard Yard. I was exiled out to Greeno. So much props to the doctor for earning a place in the yard. I also like to say, that while at Harvard, people ask me what my course of study was, doctor, and I say, well, while I was at Harvard, I took medicine. I feel much better now. Anyway, that's my one Harvard joke. I was an anthropology major, so here I am. Throughout her time in medical school, she's gained research experience in complex dermatological conditions and their treatments. I understand the skin is an organ, but you will talk to us about that. It is fascinating. She served as a research fellow in laboratory for inflammatory skin disease at Mount Sinai Hospital. And in this role, she has conducted independent research on frontal fibrosing alopecia, alopecia areata, and atopic dermatitis, among several inflammatory skin conditions. She served as first author and co-author on several scientific manuscripts published in widely read medical journals, including the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology and Allergy. So not just a doctor and a healer, but also a researcher and a writer. In addition to her career in medical research, she currently serves as a board member on a program that works at dealing with the firearm epidemic. I was just talking to some alumni who live in the neighborhood, and the gunfire epidemic is once again resurfacing in our once halcyon Spanish Harlem. So thank you for that good work. In the early months of our COVID pandemic, which I hope we're experiencing the tailwinds of, Celina bravely volunteered with Mount Sinai's COVID-19 emergency preparedness response, assisting the hospital with critical patient outreach during the crisis. This was one of the epicenters, as you know, Doctor, with when COVID. Spanish Harlem was harder hit than any other place in Manhattan. And we really are grateful for your efforts there to help get us through. She's also volunteered in patient care and administrative roles, the Kravis Children's Hospital Project for Psychiatric Outreach to the Homeless, which is a major, major challenge for our city, in particular, our society. And she's also worked at the Bellevue NYU Program for Survivors of Torture. While studying as an undergrad at Harvard University, Celina served as a research assistant in the McNally Laboratory, where she conducted research on cognitive performance, which I might be lagging at right now, but I'm doing my best, Celina, and self-efficacy. During this time, she also worked as a summer research assistant with Mount Sinai's Department of Dermatology, where she spearheaded 2 clinical research projects. And as I mentioned, she is bilingual, on the edge of trilingual. In her free time, she enjoys competing in triathlons, hiking, fitness, travel, and writing. And she's fluent in English and Swedish and proficient in Spanish. And she will soon tell us whether Sweden is going to be joining NATO. But I don't know if she'll venture forth. Finally, I'm going to turn over to the doctor. I do want to say this. Hippocrates, In Of the Epidemics, he said, a physician must be able to tell the antecedents, things that went before us, to know the present, and to foretell the future. She must mediate these things and have, and have special objects in view with regard to disease. And namely, these two things that she has to keep in mind are to do good and to do no harm. What a noble profession, what a deep human challenge that you've accepted and mastered. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Celina E. Dubin.
Thank you. That was great. That was very nice of you. And thanks for all those nice words. I am so happy to be here with all of you. I'm really excited to meet all of you, hopefully get to speak to most of you and answer any questions that you might have. I don't know if you guys have a preferred format, but I was just thinking I could tell you a little bit more, even though the bio is pretty much summed it up, about myself and how I ended up going into medicine and my experience in high school and college, as well as medical school. And then maybe we can take it into questions. I think answering specific questions, hopefully not any about Swedish international politics, but any other questions, hopefully I'll be able to answer. So I can just jump in. I'm originally from New York City. I'm the eldest of 3 siblings. I have a brother who is 24 and a sister who is about to turn 21. When I was little, I always knew that I liked medicine. My mom is a doctor and she's my greatest role model and my inspiration. And I always saw how much she loved what she did. She also contributed a lot to our early education because she taught us so much about medicine and human anatomy and things to know about the field when we were little. We had an anatomy like doll kind of in our kitchen, and she would teach us about the different organs and the different diseases that you could get for the different organs at the dinner table, basically. So I was always exposed and always excited. There were also many years in a row where I dressed up as different types of doctors for every Halloween. So I would be a surgeon and then I would be a dermatologist, and so I definitely knew early on, and I was always excited about it. Growing up when I was in school, both middle school and high school, I loved being part of teams, and that was another big part of who I was. And not as much anymore because I don't have access to team sports as much, but I was on the soccer, basketball, and lacrosse teams. I was the captain of all 3 teams when I was a senior in high school. And playing team sports was an amazing outlet and just so much fun when I was in high school, because I don't know if any of you guys play on team sports, but it's a way to make friends, connect with other people, move around, get exercise, and it's the best way to end a long school day after you've been sitting in class all day. In high school, I was also on the Science Olympiad team and was the captain of that team, both my junior and senior years as well. Very different type of team sport, but also a lot of fun. And I think my involvement in all of these teams sort of just speaks to something that I really value, which is teamwork and camaraderie and working with other people. And I'm lucky because in medicine, you're never by yourself. You're never making decisions by yourself. You're always on a team with other people. So I started that interest in being on teams and working on teams at an early age. And I'm lucky that I can keep doing that, even though it's not a sports team anymore, but definitely the team mentality. Then I went to Harvard for undergrad. I had an amazing experience there, and I'm so lucky I was able to spend 4 years of my undergraduate there. As was mentioned in my bio, I studied psychology and global health and health policy. And when I was there, I was able to actually do some research that took those 2 fields and melded them together. So that research was my junior and senior year of college. And I basically worked on conducting my own study that looked at how we benefit from aerobic exercise. So if we're able to do aerobic exercise before some sort of cognitive or academic test, whether that's a standardized test or just going into class and having to be thinking and answering questions, we we have greater cognitive efficacy after. And if someone has more specific questions later, I can go into more detail on that. But I connected that to public health initiatives by suggesting the importance of having recess and physical education in the school setting in order to maximize a child or a student's performance in the classroom or on tests or whatever the cognitive tasks may be for that day. So after college, I went straight to medical school. I was accepted while I was in college, my sophomore year in college, to a program that Mount Sinai has called the FlexMed program. The FlexMed program is an amazing admission track that Mount Sinai offers. As a sophomore in college, so your second year of college, if you've taken certain courses like biology and chemistry, you can apply to Mount Sinai for medical school. And if you're accepted, they let you finish your 4 years of undergrad, but they encourage you to study something other than just the pre-med track. So the idea is encouraging people to become more well-rounded academically before going into medical school. So that's why I was able to study psychology and public health without taking the traditional pre-med courses. So I was really lucky to be accepted through that program. So I started right after I graduated from college. The first 2 years of medical school are almost all in the classroom. At the end of those 2 years, you take a big exam. So after that exam, I started my clinical years, which was in 2019, right before the COVID pandemic. I have loved my time in medical school so far. I think I have thrived probably the most in the clinical setting. I love interacting with patients and talking to patients and learning from patients. But I've also done some extracurricular activities. I'd say the most important for me has been my research in inflammatory skin diseases, which I can talk more about as well, and my advocacy work as a board member for the nonprofit organization Scrubs Addressing the Firearm Epidemic, also known as SAFE. Outside of school, as we mentioned earlier, I love to exercise and I love to be outside. Even though I'm originally from New York City and still live in New York City, I try to be outside as much as I can and try to be active. The ideal activity for me would be going for a hike or a bike ride somewhere in nature and just appreciating nature. I've done a triathlon, I've done a few half marathons, and I'm hoping to continue to do that, although my upcoming residency is going to be a lot of time, so I'm not sure I'll have as much time for that. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I am towards the end of my medical school now. I actually next week find out what residency program I will be matching into, which is a big day in medical school. I applied into dermatology, so skin and study of the skin, and I'll spend my residency hopefully as a training dermatologist, and then afterwards a career in dermatology, and we'll see what direction that goes in. So that's pretty much what I have for you guys for now, and I would love to answer specific questions. If anyone has questions about high school, growing up, medical school, college, anything that I mentioned in my intro. And then I'd love to hear more from some of you, if any of you are interested in medicine, or if any of you are interested in whatever careers you're interested in. I'd love to learn from you guys. So I'll let you guys take it away with some questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Our first question comes from Natasha.
Hello, my name is Natasha. I would like to thank you for being our virtual speaker. And my question for you is, I read in your bio that you have authored and co-authored some scientific manuscripts. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into writing for scientific and medical journals?
Yeah, that is a great question, because I think that most people don't know about what the process is of scientific writing until you actually get to that stage, whether it's medical school or some sort of graduate school in the sciences. So what goes into writing a scientific manuscript is a lot of research before writing. So that is years or a year or however long it is of collecting data. Specifically for me, I worked in a translational lab where we looked at data from patients' skins, biopsies from patients' skin, and samples from patients' blood. And we looked at different markers of inflammation in the skin and the blood. Using what we found in terms of like what markers of inflammation were elevated or were decreased or were off in some way, we theorized about what could be going wrong in the skin. And then our ultimate goal is to find more effective treatments for these conditions based on what we understand about the inflammatory markers in the skin or in the blood. So all of that back-end research goes into writing a scientific manuscript. And what you do is you look at your data, you look at what you found from the skin and the blood, and then you kind of talk as a team and figure out like what is important here, what is new and what is different, because you can't just write the same thing that's already been found or already been published. And then you kind of try to find like a narrow focus. What are we contributing that's new? And how do we present that in a succinct way, in a concise way? And you write up a manuscript, and the manuscript consists of an introduction, which is background on the topic and background on why you did this research. It consists of a methods section, which basically walks through your participants and how you collected your data, and what statistical analysis you ran, if you ran any statistical analysis. And then your results section, and your results usually has some tables and some graphs, and you present your data that you have in that section. And then lastly, it's the discussion section, which is kind of a conclusion where you talk about the importance of your you summarize your findings and then talk about why those findings are important and what they contribute to the medical literature at that point. And then after you're done writing, you go through weeks of revisions, and you have other people read it and edits, and it goes through many, many, many versions. And then finally it's ready for submission, and then you submit it to a journal. And the decision of submitting it to a journal is kind of a tricky one, because a lot of the journals would potentially be interested in it. But some of the journals have a more narrow focus. Some of the journals are more clinical. Some of the journals are more focused on basic science. So once you decide what journal you're going to submit it to, you submit to that journal, and then you wait for their evaluation of the article. Then they get back to you. Usually you have some revisions to make, and they decide whether or not they're going to accept and publish the manuscript, or if they think it's better for another journal. It's a very long process. But it is incredibly rewarding when you finally publish your paper. But it's not an overnight kind of 5-day writing a paper and submitting it. It is a months and months and months process. You have to have a lot of patience, and you have to be willing to accept criticism, a lot of criticism. And you have to be willing to be flexible, and to, if the journal doesn't like the way you presented your research, then you have to be willing to either rewrite it or submit to a completely different journal. So it's a long process, but I've really enjoyed my time doing research and writing scientific manuscripts.
Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Amir.
Hi, my name is Amir. I'm in the 8th grade. My question for you is, I read in your biography that you were a volunteer for the Mount Sinai Emergency Preparedness Response during the pandemic. What were your greatest challenges that you faced, and how were you able to cope with them?
I just want to make sure I heard your question. You said, what were the greatest challenges while I was volunteering, and how was I able to cope with them?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question. I'll give a little bit of background on how I ended up in the volunteering position. So in 2020, in the spring of exactly 2 years ago, this time, I was in my pediatrics rotation. I was at Elmhurst Hospital. And on the last day of our rotation, they told us that school would be ending, and we wouldn't be able to go in and see patients anymore because of the pandemic. They didn't know what was happening, but it was definitely unsafe for students to be seeing patients. And in the hospital itself, it was filling up with COVID patients, and they were completely shifting everyone's workflow to be focused on the pandemic response. So everything was changing. I was no longer able to be in school, but I had in my head and my plan had been to finish school that spring. So I had a whole other rotation that I, of course, was not able to do. So I was at home and I was feeling like I wanted to do something. I wanted to help patients in some way. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to give back to the hospital. I knew the hospital was struggling. So there was a student workforce that was created by some students, some other medical students. I joined the student workforce. And in the student workforce, they had a bunch of different roles that you could do. The role that I became involved with from the beginning was the plasma donation program. And so that was really early at Mount Sinai. I think Mount Sinai was actually one of the first in the world to look into convalescent plasma as a treatment for COVID. And the idea was to test people's blood to see if they had antibodies to COVID. So if they had had COVID, if they had mounted an antibody response, and then coordinate bringing that patient in to donate plasma. And we could use their plasma, which is a component of their blood, to treat other patients who were hospitalized who were really sick with COVID. My role was kind of more on the administrative side. I was calling patients to sign them up to come into Mount Sinai to get tested to see if they had antibodies. And then I would follow their tests and I would see if they did test positive. I would call them a few days later and say, you have an antibody level of XYZ. You're eligible to donate plasma. Would you like to donate plasma? And then I would coordinate bringing them in to donate plasma, going to the blood bank, and that whole process. It was challenging because it was just a lot of patients to reach out to. And it was challenging because it was completely unprecedented. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea if this treatment worked. People were asking a lot of questions, and we didn't really necessarily have answers for them. But I will say, most of my experience was completely rewarding and amazing. And I'm so grateful I was able to do that work, because I can't even tell you how many calls I had with patients who would cry tears of happiness when I told them that they could help another patient who was hospitalized with COVID. They were just so incredibly grateful that there was something they could do. And even though they maybe had suffered through COVID or had, if they were lucky, had a mild case, the fact that they had mounted an antibody response was just so emotional for them. And that I was actually offering them something that they could do with that was really, really important for a lot of people to hear. So that was very rewarding. And I for sure will remember that experience for my entire life, because hopefully we don't encounter anything like this in the future. But it was really a moment in which I realized, like, wow, the world is coming together to try to solve this problem. And even in New York, we're banding together as a community of New Yorkers to help other New Yorkers. And that experience really, really showed me that.
Our next question comes from Joseph.
Hi, I read in your biography that you're fluent in English and Swedish and proficient in Spanish. In what ways has being bilingual helped you in your studies and career?
That's a great question. So I'd say in my career so far, being proficient in Spanish has been incredibly helpful. New York City has a lot of Spanish speaking people, some bilingual, some mainly only speak Spanish. So being able to converse with patients in Spanish has been a huge help for not only for me, but also for the patient. I think patients should be spoken to in the language they're most comfortable speaking. And of course, Mount Sinai allows us to use a medical translator, so we could call a translator or have a translator in person translate if you didn't speak Spanish or whatever language it is. But being able to offer that to patients is really important. In terms of Swedish, so my mom is from Sweden. We grew up speaking Swedish in my house, and I still speak Swedish with my mom and my siblings and my family in Sweden. I have not had any Swedish speaking patients in medical school so far, but I will say that I think being bilingual from an early age kind of helps you learn other languages and helps you think in certain ways, and is definitely a helpful tool for academics. So I'm happy I was brought up bilingual. Maybe in the future, if I'm lucky, I'll be able to go to Sweden and spend some time in one of the major hospitals there and work there. And then I will definitely use my Swedish for patients, but so far have not had that opportunity yet.
Thank you for sharing that. Definitely important to be bilingual and speak multiple languages. Our next question comes from Leilani.
Can you tell us about the most interesting case you have seen while working and studying in the medical field?
That is a big question. Let me think about that. The most interesting case that I've seen. So I can tell you about a case that I saw while I was doing a rotation in dermatology. So this has definitely stuck with me because I'm going into dermatology. We had a patient come in who had been kind of misdiagnosed multiple times with certain conditions that he very clearly did not have. Basically, he came in and described to us that he had recurrent blisters on his lips and his hands and his arms. But he had never been formally diagnosed with something. So I thought this was really interesting, and it's actually one of the reasons why I am excited about dermatology and want to go into dermatology. Dermatology is the study of the skin, and the skin is kind of a window into the body. So something can present on the skin, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something inherently wrong with the skin. Most of the time, when something presents on the skin, it means that there's something wrong inside the body. So as a dermatologist, you're almost like a detective. You look at the skin, you look at the rash, you look at the blister, whatever it may be, and you have to figure out, okay, what could this be, and what could this suggest about what's going on inside the body? And for that patient that I was just talking about, we had to do just that. We had to look at his presentation, and we had to take into account his history. And we had to talk as a team and figure out, what test do we want to run? Can we do a biopsy? What should we consider in order to get this patient a diagnosis? And it ended up being a really interesting case, because what we thought was his diagnosis was not at all his diagnosis. And there was sort of one aspect of his presentation that was a little bit different that we pursued, and that ended up being his diagnosis. And what was really exciting about that was, even though it was a challenging detective type of job to figure out what was going on and required biopsies and recurrent visits, we were actually able to offer him a treatment, because based on what we figured out he had, we knew what would likely be effective for him. So that was really rewarding. And it was also rewarding because he had been misdiagnosed so many times and had no answers. And this was a pretty painful thing for him. So that was definitely an interesting case. And hopefully we'll see many more of those sort of detective or have many more of those detective situations in my career going forward.
That's so interesting. I like that detective analogy for the dermatologist. Our next question comes from Zanai.
Hi again. I'm very interested in the medical field and hope to one day become a surgeon. So I was wondering, what advice do you have for an 8th grader who aspires to study medicine in the future?
I love that question. And Zanai, that's amazing that you know this early on. So you're already ahead of the game. the best advice I can give you is work hard in school. You will benefit so much from getting good grades and learning and getting your study habits straight from an early age, because it's a long road of school. I won't lie to you guys and pretend that it's not a lot of school. It is high school, and it is college, and then it is medical school. And that's a lot of studying and a lot of learning. So figure out your study habits, figure out what works for you, get a good work ethic. But remember that there's also more to life than just studying and just school. And a lot of people, I think, end up in situations if they just focus on school and only study all the time and ignore sort of other things in life, like family and friends and exercise and learning about other things, they sort of narrow themselves in and end up unhappy and maybe like losing their passion for medicine. So what I would say to you is focus on school, learn as much as you can. Watch any medical shows. Like I used to watch Grey's Anatomy and House. Watch those. They always made me excited about going into medicine. But don't lose sight of the other things in your life, because you want to make sure you're living a full life. And you want to make sure by the time you are applying to medical school that you still love it and that you still are excited about what you're doing every day. And narrowing yourself in so much from an early age can put that in jeopardy. When you get to high school, later in high school and college, I'd say definitely try to meet some surgeons, reach out to some surgeons and see if you can shadow them, if they would let you come work with them in clinic one day or spend a day in the operating room with them. That is an amazing experience, because then you can see firsthand what they do and ask them questions. But 8th grade is probably a little early to do that. So I would say keep that in mind for when you're later in high school and college.
Nice. That's really great advice. Our next question comes from Kevin.
Good morning. My question for you is, I read in your biograph that you enjoy fitness. Fitness is an important part of BHS culture because it helps keep us healthy and strong. Why do you think fitness is important?
I totally agree. Fitness keeps you healthy and strong. And beyond the physical effects that fitness has, which are incredibly important, fitness also helps to keep you mentally healthy and to keep you sane and to keep you happy and to give you something outside of school or outside of the home, whatever it is. Fitness and exercise are important for so many reasons, but there are also so many different types of fitness and exercise you can do. Walking is an amazing way. If you don't have time to go play a sport or go to the gym or whatever, go to physical education class or go to recess, if you walk every day, that counts as fitness, that counts as exercise. It's just important to move and to be active. It's important for your heart and your physical body going forward. There's so much research that shows how many different diseases it can prevent down the line. And then for your mental health, there is also so much research that shows how important exercise is for your mental health, your happiness, reducing depression, anxiety. And then my research from college, as I mentioned briefly, focused on how physical exercise can actually boost your cognitive performance in certain ways when on any like cognitive test. So I looked at that specifically. I was always really interested in that. I'm a big proponent of exercise when you can. Do something every day. Move your body every day.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Lexi.
My mom is a healthcare worker and she's always busy. How do you manage a healthy work-life balance?
That's a great question also. And I'm sure you've learned this from your mom. Being a healthcare worker is very challenging. It's a lot of time. It's often odd times. I've worked overnight shifts, and it's very difficult to transition from working all night and then having to sleep during the day and then going back to working during days and having to sleep at night. And it poses challenges for sure, for having a work-life balance. I think one thing is just setting your mind to carving out time every day, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever it is that you can do. Just sitting at a dinner table without your phone or without work, and just having dinner, whether it's by yourself in the hospital and thinking about something other than work, or with your family if you're at home, or with friends. Taking that time to just put everything away and being conscious about that decision. I'm just going to enjoy dinner, or I'm just going to go for a walk with my friend and talk about things other than work. But it doesn't come naturally. You have to make decisions that you're going to work it into your day, and being okay with the fact that it might only be 30 minutes of your day is also important, because it's not realistic to think you'd have 2 hours to yourself on a really busy rotation or a really busy stretch of work. Sometimes you will have 2 hours to yourself, and that's amazing. Then you can go exercise, you can cook dinner, maybe you can spend even more time with your friends or your family. But just recognizing that sometimes it's going to be less than that, but it's still important to carve out every day is important, and has been really important for me.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Kelsey.
Hello. What were some of your greatest challenges that you faced in medical school, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Medical school is definitely challenging throughout. Early on, I think one of the biggest challenges for me was the amount of information that I had to learn. You start off in medical school at Mount Sinai, at least, with the anatomy course. The anatomy course is a big course, as you can imagine. Learning about the entire human body is not easy, and it's not only in the classroom. We also have labs. So we had a cadaver dissection lab. So we had to learn about the human body by dissecting a human body, which is definitely challenging emotionally, and with the amount of time you have to put in and the amount of learning that goes into it. So I'd say in the beginning, it was really just challenging figuring out, how do I learn all of this information in 3 hours or 4 hours, however much time I had to study that day. And I would end up staying up really late and not sleeping enough because I was trying to squeeze in all the information. And I think over those first few months of medical school, I was able to figure out better study habits, to be more efficient in the way that I was learning information, be a more efficient reader, be better at recognizing from my lecture slides, this is really important or this is not important, and just figuring out how to be a more effective studier.
Thank you so much. We want to be mindful of your time. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Our next question comes from Henry.
I learned that you like to travel. What is your favorite place that you have visited so far, and why?
That's a great question. I think my favorite place that I have visited, I'm lucky that it would definitely actually would be Colorado. I'm lucky I've been able to visit Colorado in both the winter and the summer, and that's one of my favorite things about it as a state, because you have a very different experience there in the winter and in the summer, and there's always something active to do. It's also one of the most beautiful places in the world. The Rocky Mountains are incredible. And in the summer, you can go hiking and fishing and take advantage of the outdoors. In the winter, you can snowshoe or go skiing, or also go hiking in the snow if you're able to bear the cold. The people were also so nice. The people that I met there, it's a little bit more of a relaxed lifestyle than I had been used to in New York. And I think people really just appreciate nature and being outdoors. And it's a great way of life. So that's definitely my favorite place that I have visited, in both the summer and the winter.
And our last question comes from Valeria.
Hello, good morning. I would like to thank you for taking time off your day to spend it a little bit with us. Okay, so my question for you is, what did you enjoy most about your time in medical school, and what do you look forward to most being a doctor?
That's a big question, and that's a good last question. What did I enjoy the most in medical school? I think I'm going to give you two answers to that one, if that's okay. The first thing that I would say I enjoyed the most was the opportunity to meet patients and take care of patients and be part of a patient's journey when they were being treated in the hospital. I can't even put into words how much of an honor it is to be able to help someone who is in need of help, and especially when that patient is grateful for your help. And to work on a team with brilliant other minds in medicine and think about what might be going on with this patient and how can we treat this patient to get them home to their family and to get them better. It's really the first 2 years of medical school, you can kind of lose sight of why am I here? What am I doing? I'm spending 9 hours a day studying and looking in a book. And then you get to your first day of third year, and you are assigned to a patient, and you go into that patient's room and you say, "Hi, I'm Celina, I'm a medical student. I'm going to be working on your team." And then the next 2 weeks, you're seeing that patient every day, and you're very involved in that patient's life and that patient's care and the decisions about that patient's care. And you can learn so much from the patient about their experience. It's really, it is an incredible thing. And it is definitely what I enjoyed the most about medical school. It's a very unique opportunity and a very unique position to be in. And I never lost sight of that. And I will never for the rest of my career take that lightly. The other thing that I loved the most about medical school, which was actually kind of unexpected, was the people that I met and the friends that I made and the relationships that I made. I did not even think that I would come close to making as many great friends as I did during medical school. And I have a group of amazing future and current physicians who I have worked closely with throughout medical school and have formed amazingly close relationships with. And now I have basically a network of people going into different fields of medicine. Some of my best friends are in pediatrics and OBGYN and anesthesia and emergency medicine, and all over studying different fields of medicine, and knowing some amazing young physicians and being close to them and having the opportunity to learn from them is really amazing. And then I think you asked what was the most challenging part of medical school. I think the most challenging was the hours that you put in and kind of trying to stay focused on the ultimate goal, which is becoming a doctor. So it's a long journey, and the hours are often, I was waking up at 4:30 a lot of days, which is definitely very early, and going into the hospital by 5:30 and coming home at 7 and having to study a little and go to bed. It's day to day, it can be tough. So staying focused on the ultimate goal was tough. And then I think you also asked what I'm looking forward to in my career. I'm looking forward to learning more. Medicine is such an amazing field because you're a lifelong learner. There is never a shortage of things to learn about the human body, and for me, the skin. I will always be able to learn more and be able to help patients more if I can learn more. So I'm just excited for that opportunity. I'm also excited to meet more people and make more relationships and get to work closely with some brilliant minds in medicine and dermatology, and continue to foster these relationships that I have either with mentors or with colleagues or with peers, or as a resident with medical students. Just any relationships in medicine are amazing, and building the team that I have around me is always something that I enjoy doing. So I'm really looking forward to continuing that.
Thank you so much. Before we hear Ivan's final remarks, I'm going to ask Zanai to lead a short meditation so we can take in everything that you have shared with us this morning. So I'll spotlight her next.
1, 2. One, two, three.
Well, doctor, I think Devin might be on this wonderful morning with you. So I want to thank Devin for reintroducing me to Glenn, and bringing his most amazing daughter here in front of us. I wish you Godspeed and good luck with matching day. Any institution that has you is very, very fortunate. At the heart of our mission, we say that the goal is to teach children to adapt to change and to create and share lives of deep meaning, dynamic virtue, and transcendent joy. And you embody the heart of this mission quite deeply, not only in what you say, but how you say it. And you probably could have done it in Swedish as well, which is formidable. But a wonderful example for our students and my colleagues, and for me as well, to have a thoughtful, meaningful life that is engaged with healing the human body and the human spirit. So what a pleasure, what an honor. We hope one day you get to visit us in person. I'm so thankful, and I want to know if you or Devin, if she's still on, whether you have any final words, and if not, again, Godspeed in the matching process, and we look forward to having a wonderful doctor watching over us.
Thank you so much, Ivan. It was so nice to meet all of you, and I feel honored to have been even considered to speak to you guys. You had some amazing questions that are important to talk about and important to think about, and I encourage you to keep being inquisitive minds. The more questions you ask, the more answers you will get, and the more that will help you figure out what you want to do in your life. And I want to say good luck to all of you who are applying into high school now. Good luck to all of you who are applying into high school next year. Keep up the studying, no matter what field, what job you want in the future. It's always important to do well in school. But don't forget, it's also really important to have that work-life balance and spend time with your friends and your family. Do some exercise, pick up a new hobby, draw a drawing, paint a painting, whatever it is that you like to do outside of school. Don't lose sight of that. Again, it was an honor to speak to all of you, meet all of you, and I think Ivan and Courtney and Devin, whoever, have my contact information. So if any of you have follow-up questions, you can feel free to get in contact with me through them. I'm happy to answer more questions. And again, as Ivan mentioned, I really hope I can come visit you guys in person at some point, when hopefully COVID isn't, as we mentioned, in the tail end. So I'm hoping we can make that happen soon. Thank you again. Have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy the hopefully upcoming spring. And yeah, thanks again.